I have already gotten comments on the color of my vestment. So few men look good in pink. I'm afraid I'm not one of them. But no, this is the color that's worn twice a year. Today in the old calendar was called Laetare Sunday, the fourth Sunday of Lent. And laetare is one of the Latin words that means rejoice. And rejoice, it's almost half over. We're nearing the home stretch, so whatever you've given up, playing the ponies or eating gummy bears or whatever, it's almost over. That's what this is. It's a lightening of the penitential color. We do it in Advent too, because Advent was a fasting season once upon a time, and well, there's no law against fasting, but that's for another day. I just love this gospel because it's well, most of you live in Skokie, and some after a while, it's so Jewish. I mean, this is an eyewitness account, I really believe. Have you ever noticed how Jews answer a question with a question? Where are you going? What's it to you? You know, that's in the Talmud. You know, when Jesus went to the temple, the scripture says they weren't amazed by his answers, they were amazed by his questions. The Jewish approach is a question leads to another question, hence the Talmud. It's a very long work. And here we go. This man, all of a sudden, this is another Yiddish word that you should all learn, chutzpah. He goes into, he's nobody from nowhere. He's a blind beggar. He's the kind of guy that you drive by probably sitting at the entrance ramp or the exit ramp of the expressway. He's nobody from nowhere. And all of a sudden, Jesus works a miracle in his life. He's healed. And the authorities who have disbarred any believers in Jesus from the synagogue, they're grilling him. Well, he's grilling them. You don't know where he's from. Well, that's something. How can this be? If he's a sinner, he heals me. And he's got such nerve. And somehow those of us who live in Skokie probably have met people like this. So this is a wonderful gospel, and it brings up a few good questions. There's some interesting references. In the first reading, you'll notice that Samuel says, or God says to Samuel, "You're not judging by my standards." It's exactly what Jesus tells Peter. You're not judging by my standards. That God looks at nobodies, like David, like the blind beggar, like a carpenter in Nazareth, like you and me. God picks nobodies, and he makes them somebodies. That's almost the heart of the gospel. The good news of the kingdom. Have you ever heard that phrase? Jesus went preaching the good news of the kingdom. Told you many times. The word kingdom doesn't mean what we mean by kingdom. For us, a kingdom is a political system or a geographic territory. Basileia is a quality of the king. It means royalness. And so what Jesus preached when he preached the good news of the kingdom, he preached the good news of God's royalness. That means that you and I, in the eyes of the world, may be nobody. But in God's eyes, we are potentially princes and princesses of the kingdom. God looks at you as somebody who has an essential role in the work of his kingdom. Now, this gospel brings a question to many of us, I'm sure. I'm sure when you've heard this gospel, you've asked yourself the question, why did Jesus spit on the ground, make some wet clay, and put it on the guy's eyes? What was he doing? I mean, that sounds a little disgusting, as a matter of fact. Well, what was Jesus doing? Man was made from the clay of the earth. You see, this is a new creation. Jesus is symbolically giving this guy new life. He's recreating him. The man is born again. He can see what he did not see, and that's the symbol that's going on. He can see what he did not see. He has a new kind of life. He has quite literally been born again. Jesus is not breaking the law. He's fulfilling the law. That's a very important thing to understand. Remember that Jesus said, I've not come to destroy the law, but to fulfill the law. and he is fulfilling the law. You're not supposed to work on Sabbath. Well, the Pharisees were very picky about this, and they wanted Jesus gone. Some of the Pharisees actually were protective and supportive of Jesus. It was ultimately the Sadducees that executed Jesus, not the Pharisees. But the official mechanism of the synagogue was kind of worried about this Jesus. And they were looking for any good excuse to point out that, don't listen to this guy, he's out of his mind. And the Jews defined work carefully because you didn't do it on a Sabbath. I don't know if you know any Orthodox Jews, but all this resting on the Sabbath is a lot of work. For instance, they have something I'm looking at my watch. I'm going to try not to be too long today. Good luck. They have something which in Yiddish is called the blech. Isn't it Yiddish? It's a lovely language, almost as pretty as German. It's a blech, which is just a German word for sheet metal. And you have the stove on, and you have the blech on it, and you can move things around on the blech to keep them warmer or cooler, but you can't cook anything on the Sabbath. And I believe you can turn up the heat, but you can't turn it down. You've got to get some Gentile to do that. Often is the time I've turned down the stove at the rabbi's house. It's a lot of work. All this resting on the Sabbath. They define with a passion what work is. Now, healing is the work of a doctor. It's clearly forbidden. If you were to come across a person laying in the gutter bleeding to death, you could tie up that person's wounds so they didn't die. But you couldn't put any medicine on that they got better. You'd have to wait till Sunday morning to do that. Well, Jesus is not only healing, but he's making clay.